One day at the hospital where I work, I ran into a friend of my mom's named Karen. She looked at me in surprise and said, "What are you doing here? You're out of place. If you're looking for a job, you won't find one. Go back home." Karen's comment shocked the doctors around us. They didn't know what to say. I thought, what is she talking about? I hope this doesn't turn into a big issue. It might be too late already. It seemed Karen didn't realize that making an enemy of me was not a good idea. I couldn't keep quiet anymore and confronted her. "Karen, you really don't hold back, do you? Or do you just not get it?" Looking confused, she answered, "Huh? What are you talking about?" "My name is Olivia. I'm 37 years old, a mother of an active 9-year-old daughter and a playful 2-year-old son. My husband, Jackson, who is 3 years younger than me, is a dedicated nurse at a general hospital. I used to work too, but since having our second child, I've been on maternity leave. We once lived in a small 3-bedroom apartment, but before our son was born, we moved into a second-hand house with a loan. It needs some work but could be a cozy home. It has a big garden for the kids to play in and a rooftop balcony with a calming view. The house is old, which adds to its charm, and my husband and I really like it. Near our house is a beautiful park where the kids can play all they want, and it's our little paradise on weekends. Late in my second pregnancy, I met a mom in that park who introduced herself as Karen. Since her daughter and mine are the same age and often play together, Karen and I became friends and had many conversations. Karen always wears bright designer clothes, and her daughter is dressed in well-known brands. When I found out Karen worked as a surgeon at a well-known hospital, I guessed it might be the same one where my husband Jackson works. Out of curiosity, I asked her about it, and to my surprise, she did work there. Excited by this coincidence, she said with sparkling eyes, "This is such a coincidence. I'd love to meet your husband." So we decided to invite her over for tea the next weekend. On the promised Sunday, Karen and her daughter came to our house, but as soon as she walked in, she started looking around suspiciously, as if she was searching for something. "This house feels old. Did you inherit it from your family?" she asked. "No," I replied. "We bought it secondhand and moved in just last year. It is indeed old." As my husband spoke, Karen examined each piece of furniture as if she was evaluating its worth. We were taken aback by her rudeness. Meanwhile, the children played happily in the playroom, and only the adults were quietly enjoying tea in the living room. "Jackson, which department do you work in at the hospital?" Karen asked. "I work in the emergency department," Jackson said, a bit embarrassed. "But actually, I'm not a doctor, I'm a nurse. I support the doctors." "Really? You're a nurse?" she asked. "Yes, I graduated from medical school, but haven't passed the licensing exam yet. I plan to retake it next year." Karen's eyes widened, and she seemed to choose her words carefully. It's quite unusual to hear of someone graduating from medical school and not passing the licensing exam. Her next words made us uncomfortable. Can a nurse's salary really support a family with children? Are you managing the mortgage payments and living expenses okay? Or is that why you chose an old second-hand house? Her questions hurt us, and all we could do was give an erased smile. Karen made several more rude remarks, and we were speechless. After she left, I apologized to Jackson for the uncomfortable situation. "Jackson, I'm really sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable because of what Karen did. Maybe I should keep some distance from her from now on." "Don't worry about it," Jackson reassured me with a warm smile. "It was unexpected, but her personality certainly stands out. It's good to connect with other moms in the neighborhood, but I decided it would be best to not get too involved with Karen in the future." As time passed, new changes came to our family. I reached full term and safely gave birth to our second son. After celebrating his first birthday, I started to think about returning to work. Luckily, Jack's parents live nearby and have been a great help with the kids. Then, one day, I had some business at the hospital where my husband works. With some time before my meeting, I grabbed a hot coffee at the hospital cafe and was taking a moment to relax when I heard a familiar voice behind me. It was Karen. Oh my, isn't that Olivia? It's been such a long time. Hello, Karen. How have you been? Good. What brings you here today? Are you here to see Jackson? Maybe for a job interview or something? It must be tough on just Jack's income, right? Her tone was sarcastic, and she had a smug look as she spoke. Wanting to avoid a troublesome conversation, I responded lightly, well, something like that. However, Karen continued to pry, looking me over. This hospital has various stores, right? So where are you working part-time? At the convenience store or maybe the restaurant? After a brief silence, I curtly replied, sorry, it's about time for my appointment. I quickly left the cafe and moved swiftly through the hospital. I took the elevator to the top floor. My destination was the director's office, where I had an important job consultation. After about an hour of discussion, I headed to the large auditorium of the university for my next appointment. There was an important announcement scheduled that afternoon with all the hospital staff gathered. On the way to the auditorium by chance, I ran into Jackson. Jackson, that's great. After the director's talk, let's go for lunch together, I suggested. Sounds good. It's a bit of a walk, but how about pasta? He offered with a smile. The pasta place behind the hospital sounds good. I haven't been there in a long time. I'm actually looking forward to it. I agreed happily. It had been a while since I had been to the hospital, so lunch with my husband was a rare treat. In the hallway to the auditorium, I ran into several doctors and engaged in brief conversations while exchanging greetings. Jackson moved ahead quickly, and I followed at a leisurely pace towards the passageway leading to the auditorium. I met some colleague doctors. Olivia, it's really been a while, and I heard you had a child. Congratulations, they said warmly. Another doctor joined in. Olivia, you were such a big help here. We've been in quite a stir since you left, he said with a laugh, hinting at their struggles. Then another asked with interest, is your turn imminent? The reunion was comforting, filled with nostalgia and relief to see my colleagues well. But the atmosphere quickly changed when Karen appeared. Olivia, why are you here? Karen asked curiously. Are you heading to the auditorium by any chance? Yes, that's right. I have some business. I responded modestly yet clearly with several colleagues around. But Karen's questions grew more pressing. But the gathering is only for doctors and nurses, right? Why would a part-timer be here? She asked, not hiding her skepticism. Her remark brought silence to the corridor, a silence that felt heavy. A part-time lady like her, a doctor muttered. Is she okay? Another murmured worriedly. I tried to ignore Karen's words, not wanting to stir up unnecessary trouble. However, Karen seemed only more provoked. Why are you ignoring me? It's like you don't think at all. You, Karen exclaimed with a sneer. Lost your way? The auditorium isn't this way. If you're looking for part-time work, go the other direction. Now, please leave, she commanded, looking down on me. The doctors present were appalled by Karen's behavior, but they stood by me, trying to diffuse the situation. They raised their voices in unison against Karen. Disappointment and anger were evident on their faces, and their voices contained a strong sense of rejection toward her actions. Hold on, what kind of way is that to speak to Olivia? Don't you have any manners? Apologize to her right now. They demanded, not just disapproving but reproaching Karen's conduct. The doctors gathered, looking tense, and confronted Karen. The atmosphere was charged with tension. Faced with a united front against her, Karen appeared confused and at a loss for words. What's going on? I just pointed out that she doesn't belong here. The meeting is only for relevant personnel, and she doesn't fit the bill, right? She tried to justify her stance, but my patience had reached its limit. With a composed tone, but with content sharp as a blade, I addressed Karen. Karen, you really are brave, aren't you? Or is it that you simply can't read the room? I critiqued calmly. Unable to find a rebuttal, she stared back at me, perplexed. How? What did you just say? I calmly made my point clear. You'll understand soon enough the consequences your actions and careless remarks could bring. The doctors around us showed no sympathy for Karen. Look, your future here is now utterly uncertain, they told her sharply. You might want to start looking for another job while you still can. They nodded to each other, clearly having cornered Karen, who was still unable to hide her panic and anger. So why on earth are all of you defending this non-regular employee so much? I don't understand why you rate her so highly. She raised her voice. The conversation among the doctors echoed in the hallway. Are you the new surgical specialist who joined last year? One doctor asked her. So that's why you don't know Olivia. That's quite pitiful. Another added. Karen, with anger on her face and indignation in her tone, retorted, What can you explain what you mean by that? Her anger stemmed from the belief that judging people by their professional standing, regardless of their duties as a doctor, was against human dignity. The fact that someone with such values was in our workplace was deeply shocking to me, and I couldn't help but feel distressful. Karen seemed unaware, but in fact, I was the very person she should respect the most. The other doctors completely ignored Karen's questions and left her with cold stares, quietly leaving the scene. Well, Karen, we can talk more about this later. You may find my husband's position as a nurse pitiable, but no matter how hard you try, you can never be like Jackson. Besides, the fact that you find meaning in competing shows a great misunderstanding on your part, I said. Karen became flustered. Wait a minute, who on earth are you? You're not just a part-timer, are you? She raised her voice. I smiled secretly and replied, As I've already said, you'll come to understand shortly. With that, I hurried off toward the auditorium. As I entered, a large number of doctors had already gathered, and the director stood in front of the screen as most of the attendees had arrived. Everyone, thank you for gathering here during your busy schedules. Today, I would like to discuss the future direction of our hospital. He began and then proceeded to make an important announcement. Seeing Jackson in the crowd, he approached me and whispered, Olivia, good timing. I happened to overhear a bit earlier. Was there some trouble with Karen? Yes, she did point out something minor, but it's not a big deal. Interestingly, it seems she has misunderstood me for a part-time worker at this hospital. I replied, and Jack looked shocked. He responded, No way, Olivia as a part-timer. We couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous the situation was. During this, the director finished explaining the annual business plan and moved on to an important personnel announcement. As you all know, our hospital has enough doctors and nurses. To further improve our medical services, we plan to start overseas training programs. The first training is scheduled in 3 months, and we will select 6 doctors and 6 nurses for it, he announced. This news was met with cheers from the doctors, and everyone was excited about the opportunity. Overseas training was a great chance to learn about the latest medical practices worldwide, and since it was the hospital's first initiative of its kind, everyone was thrilled. The director then said, Now, let's move on to announcing the selected 11. I remarked with a slight surprise, Look, the medical students have already been chosen. Jack listened silently next to me, waiting for the announcement to continue. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Karen. With her excellent clinical skills and remarkable treatment results, the director announced. There was no dispute in her selection. Surprisingly, Karen, who had just been in a conflict, was the first chosen as a trainee. The applause and cheers in the hall seemed to celebrate each accomplishment and effort. As Karen stepped forward, whispers of her notable achievements in medicine spread, highlighting her recognition among peers. The director continued with expectation. Now let's proceed with announcing the names of the rest who have been selected. A silence of mixed tension and anticipation fell as the names of the chosen 11 were called out one by one. Although Jack's name was not called this time, his expression showed no disappointment. He quietly watched with a sense of celebration as each selected individual stepped forward. Addressing the 11 lined up on stage, the director asked, "Are all of you ready in spirit for the training? Please share a word about your enthusiasm and determination." He encouraged them gently. Each gave a brief but resolute speech, reaffirming their strong intentions. After everyone had spoken, it was finally Karen's turn. She spoke with proper decorum yet confidently. "I am truly grateful for this training opportunity. I aim to help our hospital progress further with the advanced medical techniques I will learn abroad," she said with a polished greeting. Then she turned slowly towards where we were seated and continued in her assertive tone. "However, this hospital has inexperienced nurses who continue to fail the national exam and bold individuals who try to attend medical conferences despite not being regular staff. I intend to improve and transform all these aspects." Karen's bold statement changed the mood in the room, and the looks directed at her turned cold. Her words brought out the hospital's tensions and showed how risky youthful overconfidence can be. The director's intense gaze seemed to freeze the room, adding gravity to the situation. Maintaining his calm, the director asked Karen, "Karen, that comment was about those two sitting there, wasn't it?" His smile was calm, but didn't reach his eyes. Confidently nodding, Karen replied, "Yes, exactly. There are those unfit for this noble assembly." Remaining composed, the director then called out unexpectedly, "Olivia, could you come forward, please?" With this invitation, I, who had been just an observer, suddenly became the center of attention. Confused and beginning to lose her confidence, Karen asked, "Why her? Why are you calling her name?" The director, showing disappointment towards Karen, said in a quiet voice, "Karen, I am disappointed in you. Olivia, please introduce yourself to everyone." Taking a deep breath, I started, "Hello, everyone. It's been a while. I am Olivia, the chief of the medical department. I apologize for any inconvenience my maternity leave may have caused, but I will be resuming my duties next month. I look forward to working with you all again." Karen's voice couldn't hide her surprise. "Wait, she's the chief of the medical department." Her eyes searched the room for confirmation. Indeed, as the head of the medical team, I was about to return to my role. I had taken a 3-year parental leave to give birth to and raise my first son. The director, confirming the truth, added quietly, "By the way, Olivia is my daughter." His words rang clear in the room, clearly defining the situation. Karen's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Her mouth opens as if she wanted to object, but no words came out. The room, filled with hospital staff, couldn't hold back, and suppressed laughter spilled out at the unexpected turn of events. The director spoke in a relaxed tone, "Karen, for this upcoming overseas training, you have been assigned to be the team leader. Your deployment will be in a conflict zone in the Middle East. There is a shortage of both medication and medical equipment, and it's going to be very challenging. It will be interesting to see how well your skills hold up there. But don't worry, Olivia will be there to support you. Try to learn as much as you can under her guidance." Proud, Karen responded with dignity, "I am a doctor too. Although I have no experience working abroad, my clinical skills and treatment records are first class. I will not allow myself to be underestimated." I replied to Karen with a calm but firm voice, "Let me make one thing clear, Karen. In the near future, I am going to take over the directorship of this hospital from my father. Do you understand the weight of this fact?" Karen's expression stiffened. Seeing this, I continued, "Yes, it seems you understand well. Depending on my decision, your future in this hospital may be affected." Karen could no longer hide her agitation. "I haven't heard such a thing," she muttered. Jackson intervened calmly, adding quietly, "Karen, we had not informed you about that matter beforehand. Your disrespectful attitude towards Olivia may well be something you deeply regret in the future. Towards the end of the meeting, the director stated firmly, "Please, everyone, a bit of silence. Karen in the discussions here, in the end, results are everything. No matter how excellent you may be, that is just one aspect. What's important is the results you can achieve in this hospital, and on that front, I have great expectations of you." Karen fell silent at the director's words, bowed her head, and nodded without saying anything. The director concluded, "Today's meeting is adjourned." As his words ended, everyone in the auditorium stood up and returned to their respective places. Stepping out of the director's office leisurely, I casually said, "Shall we go for lunch? I've got a craving for pasta today." Side by side with Jackson, we left the meeting behind us. I started walking towards our favorite pasta place behind the hospital, leaving the building behind. As we were about to pass the small smoking area set up behind the hospital, I spotted Karen. She was deep in thought, taking a drag of her cigarette. When our eyes met, Karen awkwardly looked away. Just then, a loud crash caught our attention. A car had rear-ended another in an accident. Jack and I sprang into action immediately. The area was nearly deserted, so it was crucial for us to move quickly to help. "Are you okay?" Jack called out with concern and quickly checked on the people involved in the accident. One was the driver in the car that was hit, and another was a pedestrian who happened to be walking by. Karen also rushed to the accident scene, but seemed overwhelmed by the chaos. Acting on my medical instincts, I began to give directions. "Jackson, quickly get that man into a safe position and check his pulse," I instructed. Jack moved without wasting any time, following my instructions promptly. As an emergency nurse, Jack had received special training, including attending surgeries I conducted. I had trained him rigorously, which helped him develop exceptional practical skills compared to other nurses. I then directed Karen with calm and clarity. "Karen, check if that elderly person is bleeding and assess their level of consciousness." However, Karen seemed paralyzed by the seriousness of the situation, standing still without moving. My voice grew firmer as I insisted, "Karen, do you understand what I'm saying? Please respond quickly." Her voice was tense. Karen was clearly overwhelmed, and with an unstable voice, she replied, "Ah, yes, what should I do?" Her panic was evident and seemed to add to the confusion at the scene. I rebuked Karen firmly yet patiently. "Don't you know what to do in an emergency? I doubt you're even a surgeon." Karen responded with what could be perceived as anger. "That's not true. There's nothing I can't do." But her actions, though active, clearly lacked effective measures, and she was just bustling about the scene. I then looked to Jackson. "Jackson, could you measure that elderly person's blood pressure and make sure there's no bleeding?" I gave the orders calmly. Jackson promptly replied, "Understood," and began to manage the situation. The accident scene started to regain some order with our swift response. Jack spoke to Karen with unusual sternness. "Karen, come over here and help." Karen reacted to Jack's command. "What do you mean? A nurse asking for such a thing?" she complained. But Jack cut her off. "This is no place for someone who can't do anything. If you're not going to help in this critical moment where lives are at stake, please step back," he said decisively. Karen was at a loss for words and stepped back from the scene silently. Jackson assessed the situation and reported to me, "The vitals are stable, but there might be internal damage. We should conduct a thorough examination as soon as possible." As professionals, we showed readiness to collaborate with other medical staff around us, doing our best for the patients. I led the response steadily. "Let's begin the procedures then. And the driver over there seems disoriented, but I don't see any serious symptoms. Let's move him out of here. Karen, could you please call an ambulance on your cell phone?" Despite my instructions, Karen stood frozen, unable to move. I addressed her with suspicion. "Karen, I'm speaking to you. Do you hear me?" Karen seemed confused, hesitantly murmuring, what's the number for the ambulance again?" Jack intervened. just give me that phone." He stepped in and took over, arranging for the ambulance. About 10 minutes later, police and fire department personnel arrived, and the once chaotic accident scene started to be sorted out gradually. People gathered, including doctors, department heads, medical students, and even professors. Without being disturbed by this, I spoke to Karen with calm and stern emphasis on the gravity of the situation. "Karen, to be frank, your actions earlier were more of a hindrance than a help. What exactly can you say you've accomplished?" I posed the direct question. Karen was silent, unable to answer. In the medical field, every minute, every second can determine the outcome. "This is not a place to protect your ego," I continued. Karen's voice was barely audible as she apologized. "I'm sorry." The crowd at the accident scene quietly observed their exchange, and the director himself was also present. Karen just seemed out of place and embarrassed. I continued, "Karen, you've looked down on Jack as just a nurse, but the fact is, your positions are different. There's no meaning in comparing you and Jackson. He is one of the most competent nurses in this hospital. Can't you see now how powerless and insufficient your actions were in this situation?" Karen stubbornly retorted, "If I had more experience in emergency situations, I could handle it perfectly well." But Jack sensed the uncertainty behind her words and calmly pointed out her flaw. "You're always driven by a desire to have your accomplishments recognized, but your actual skills in the field are still immature. You've just demonstrated that yourself," he asserted. He continued, "You say you'll gain experience in emergency treatment in the future, but this moment is also a practical situation. Given your current state, it's unlikely you'll have further opportunities to experience the field in the future." Karen's confidence began to show cracks, and she seemed on the verge of tears, aware of the eyes around her. Yet the medical field, dealing with lives, demands proper judgment and strictness. Therefore, I had to make a tough decision that would impact Karen's future. "Karen, I regret to say this, but your name will be removed from the Overseas Training Program candidate list," I declared. Karen was taken aback. "What?" I looked to the director for confirmation. "Father, this decision is acceptable, correct?" The director nodded deeply. "No problem. This incident has given me a clear understanding of her capabilities. I have great expectations for Jack. We have always selected trainees based on their grades, but it may be necessary to reconsider our selection system in light of this." His quiet but firm response marked a complete defeat for Karen. With a calm but resolute voice, I advised Karen, "Karen, it's important for you to relearn from the basics. Only then will you have the right to compete at the same level as Jack. Also, take to heart the dangers of judging a person's worth by their appearance. While I considered letting you go from the workplace, I have decided to give you one more chance, the last chance. Make the most of this opportunity and show us your full effort," I advised sternly yet justly. Afterward, they quietly left the scene, but the looks from the doctors around Karen were cold, filled with disappointment and disapproval. Their evaluation of her future was seemingly already set. Weeks passed, and the long-awaited departure day for the overseas training arrived. Jack and I headed to the airport, excited to acquire new knowledge and experience. I heard that Karen resigned from the hospital a month after the incident. She couldn't handle the cold stares from those around her and chose to put her pride first. Personally, I thought that was for the best. A doctor who prioritizes pride over everything else shouldn't be responsible for patients' lives, and no one would want to trust their life to such a person. On the way to the airport, I spoke to Jackson with hopeful words. "Jackson, let's use our skills to make this hospital one of the most famous in the world." Sharing that passion and reaffirming his determination, Jackson replied, "That's right. I need to work even harder and get my medical license as soon as possible." And so, I quietly made a promise to myself again, reaffirming my strong commitment as a doctor to fulfill my duties.